for 16 years, and actually 16, and transformed his town, his city, into an extraordinary center of dynamism and like a magnet for growth. And I think we would be really interested to hear your story, Rafał. Excuse me. To hear your story of how it works. But equally, I think there is an absolutely vital element to the whole future of cities and their growth and everything else, and that's the question of sustainable development. And Wolfgang Teubner, who is the European Regional Director for ICLE, is the Local Government Association for Sustainable Development, is the perfect person to actually give us an idea about how towns and cities are not just about growth, but are about sustainable growth and how they can do it. So, Rafał, I'll hand to you as the first one to go.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. I will be talking, in fact, about 3 levels of capital, because whatever you do, whatever you want to do, you need money, it means capital, you need people, the better educated, the better, it means human capital, and you need people cooperating, working, being able to work together. It means social capital. And now imagine the map. There are 3 big cities, Prague, Warsaw, Berlin. Exactly in the middle, there is a middle-sized city, the city of Wrocław, which has 700,000 people, the agglomeration 900,000 people. We will be starting now in the year 2003. The unemployment rate was growing and growing, and in the year 2003 was already on the level 14. And we did a really big survey asking people what do they want to get. And they were crying for jobs. That was the most important issue in the year 2003. There was already big Polish migration, because people knowing we will be joining the European Union, they went for better salaries to London, to Dublin, to Western Europe. But in addition, we had in Poland in the year 89 a really rich baby boom, and this baby boom came to the labor market exactly in the year 2003-2004. The reason for the baby boom was martial law, which was introduced in the year 81. No electricity, police hour, you're not able to leave your home, and therefore really huge, but somehow blessed, I would say, baby boom. And then the year 2004 came, the 1st of May, Poland joined the European Union, and the action started in 2 directions. The first one was, I was talking here one month ago about this very issue. Immediately after we joined the European Union, I addressed an appeal to the Polish migrants, come back, because we will be creating jobs for you. And somehow this action, this campaign was so interested, BBC invited me to take part in this famous talk show, Hard Talk. I refused, because just at the beginning I didn't know what is it about, but then people told me it's pretty important, and then I accept. There was an interview, pretty good, what repeated. Finally, 67 million people were watching this interview, and then televisions from 42 countries arrived to Wrocław, including Al Jazeera, to make an interview. In the promotion of the city of Wrocław started. In addition, because of the process of enlargement, there were 3 big investment waves coming to the eastern part of Europe. From western to eastern part, from Asia to somewhere to the European Union, but because of the lower labor costs to the new countries, and then from America again to somewhere to the European Union, but one more time to our part. And as I used to be before headhunter, that was my only experience, how to deal with companies, how to deal with businesses. And in the very first stage, we accepted 60% of investment coming to Poland. The issue was we created a special company which was dealing with investors that was a special kind of project management. Every single investor got a special project manager who was responsible to lead the project from the beginning till the good end. I mean, not one-step shop, but a personal project manager who was dedicated to the business. And then, having the investment, we are working on connecting them with local businesses, procurement change. I mean, local companies connected, cooperating with those investors coming from abroad. And thirdly, the bridges between university milieu and business. That we push our universities to create new curricula to cooperate with businesses, because the most important issue was to create jobs, but then to create better jobs for better educated people. And the final issue was we then finally push people to create own companies. I mean, having already experience from a big corporation with big Western investor to create something own. And then we started to think about new subject, which is innovation. Innovation are pretty important. I was explaining already here, but I'm going to repeat the issue. When you try to measure the amount of money circulating in a certain space, there is a very good indicator. You can take the number of jobs and multiply it by an average salary. And if you want to make this amount growing, you have to generate jobs, or you have to make salaries growing. But only in a way economy would be able to carry. It means in terms of production, you have to produce something better, because then it could be expensive, more expensive, and you would be getting, selling this, you would be getting more money. But to be able to produce something what is better, you have to be creative, you have to be innovative. And to create innovative society, you need universities, you need an open society, being able to exchange ideas, and you need to invest into culture, because there is a very high level of the correlation between culture, investment into culture, and innovations. It's really deeply proven. Therefore, therefore, this idea in the year 2016, we won the bid to be European Capital of Culture, and we really invested a lot, spending money for events and for the cultural infrastructure. And now the results. Firstly, in Europe, in the European Union, we have 276 regions. In the decade between 2006 and 2016, according to Eurostat, the region number 1 in job creation was Lower Silesia, and more than 60% of those jobs created in Lower Silesia were created in Wrocław. It means we European number 1 in job creation. In this very decade, we created, remember, Wrocław is a city of 700,000 people, and we have been creating 400,000 new jobs. The GDP per capita started growing really rapidly, faster than in China. It's already more than 2 times higher than it used to be 10 years ago. But it made us able, because when GDP is growing, when the number of jobs are growing, and when the average salary is growing, you're getting better, higher taxation. It means that the city budget was growing as well. And it made us able to spend our new money to make the quality of life higher. Because you always have to combine those 2 issues, I mean job creation and making the quality of life higher, and making the education better. And finally, Wrocław started to be number 1 in the country in terms of research and development. We have more than 30 centers connected to this subject. Then, okay, we are dealing with smart city. Anyway, there is a funny definition of being smart city, I told you already. A smart city is a city where people have to spend at least 2 hours in the heavy traffic jam to to have time for thinking, to be smart. Yeah, this is but okay, and three issues in addition. An additional, very positive result I was dreaming about before, the city started to be international. We have already 200,000 people coming from abroad, from 124 countries. They are mainly Ukrainians, more than 100,000 people from the Ukraine, but still people from 124 countries. It means it is going to be an open society. Now, remark number 2, because my successors, they have to maintain the system, they have to they have to support this growth. What is dangerous? Dangerous is politics, because what we have nowadays in Poland, the state of rule of law doesn't exist anymore. And should the ruling party win again at the end of the year, then they will demolish free media and local local governments. But if not, then the direction we want to go in the city of Wrocław is sustainable development, dealing much more with ecology, climate change, and keeping the development much more sustainable. And this is why I should switch to my friend Wolfgang.
Well, I mean, to potentially follow on what Raphael was just sort of introducing, I think, I mean, next to economic development, of course, we are facing a number of global challenges, not least climate change, but I think we have, of course, also a number of other resource issues, biodiversity, etc., which are, of course, in general, I think, challenges for the future and the quality of life of human beings in general. And I think the combination that Raphael has just introduced, I think, is of high importance. I mean, if you look at urban development, I mean, if you look at a day like this, when you have, you know, around 30 degrees, I mean, you have to see that is not necessarily you know, the most agreeable condition. And if you just think that this is happening more often, more frequently, we will see potentially higher temperatures. I mean, first of all, you should have an interest to on the one hand side stop further kind of, you know, heating of the planet. The second way, of course, you have to be able to manage the development that is currently ongoing in order to ensure that the citizens have a good quality of life. So how are you sort of, you know, achieving that, and how is that really related to economic development? I mean, I think in the first place, I mean, this whole issue of you know, scaling up the quality of your economy and also to see, I would say, the transition from, you know, getting external investment, which can be quite unsustainable to a certain extent. Because, I mean, if you think, I mean, also what happened, you know, 20 years ago in Eastern Germany, that a lot of money was coming in, a lot of companies were coming in and taking also short-term advantage of the subsidies that were provided, the cheap land that was provided. But, you know, this is going often on minimal cost margin issues. And as soon as the wages increase, you know, they pull out again. Or, you know, they are not necessarily, they're organized in a way as multinationals that they do not necessarily contribute to the tax beyond the tax that are basically provided by the employees. So I think when you look at also the strategy that Wrocław has applied to say, okay, you know, as soon as possible, we create sort of a local economy around that, and to build basically our own, you know, production, innovation, and by that have the chance to build value chains where we also basically can capture the value for the further development of the city. Because I mean, you have to make sure that with the economic development, you will also be able to capture the value that is generated in your city for the further development of the city. Because what otherwise will happen is, you know, you will have to face a lot of impact. You will have to provide a lot of infrastructure, land, transportation. You will generate a lot of things that the taxpayers have to provide in some way, you know, by public money, but you will not capture on the profits that are generated to improve the systems. You will then earn a lot of pollution. You will earn a lot of issues. You will see problems with your energy system and a lot of other things, but you will not be able to develop that in a sustainable way. The second part is, of course, we need to transform. I mean, you know, particularly for Ukraine, I mean, you have a lot of challenges in, for example, the field of energy. I mean, you know, there's a high dependency on either nuclear or importing energy sources. And I think, you know, renewable energy can be, a big chance, also a big opportunity for a country like Ukraine. Because, I mean, in principle, you start to produce your own energy. We have across Europe a big boost of local energy production, which means also the investment is local, the value capturing is local. So with this transformation, you can basically capture two things at the same time. You know, you create opportunities locally, you create local value chains, you create local employment, and you capture the value. The same is true also for energy efficiency. I mean, if you improve your buildings, you know, you have to, of course, you know, you have to have the skills, the training, the capacity building. That's one part that Raphael was mentioning. But at the same time, you know, these people are getting employment, you get work, you get investment, you get improvement, and the quality of life in the city is improving. And I think also in that sense, and we discussed this also, I think you need to that end a kind of strategy. And I think that was also explained by Rafa. You know, you need to have a mid to long-term vision. You have to create an idea about the future of the city that is also supported and carried by the inhabitants. You know, that is going beyond terms of individual political power of one mayor or of one council term. It needs to have an idea, because also this is how, you know, together with all these cultural aspects, you create an image for the city. You know, that is basically sold in measurement. If you look at the leading cities in the world in all these indexes, you know, I mean, as I said, I mean, you can take 25 cities in Europe and shake them in, you know, different ways, because they have all, depending on the criteria, sometimes they're number 10, sometimes they're number 5, but it's always the same group of cities. And what these cities have achieved is they have got, you know, certain strategies in their DNA. You know, regardless who's in power, they go their way. I mean, Copenhagen will always be a biking city, whether there's left, right, or whatever. They will also always have a sustainable energy policy. Nobody ever would question that. You know, they will always have these. They will carry this image of being a green city and an attractive city which has a high quality of life. I think this is what you have to achieve. You know, to do a process where you have a long-term vision that is widely accepted in the population, that is carried, and then that you have to transform sooner or later in strategic planning. I know that this is a bit of the challenge in many of the Eastern countries with the kind of post-Soviet history, that planning has a very negative connotation. It's very, you know, people have very strong ideas that, you know, we just get out of all these 5-year plans and everything. We don't need more of this. But I think then call it strategy or call it something. But I think you have to be very careful about, you know, how you change your city in a deliberate way. You know, if you just change it by individual plots and do a building here and a building there and an investment here, this will not ultimately end up in a very highly attractive city, and it will ultimately potentially lead to the contrary and make it a less attractive place. And this is, of course, dangerous because we live in a globalized world and people are moving very fast. And I mean, as much as I congratulate Rafal to be a very attractive place and to attract a lot of Ukrainian people, but maybe it would have also, you know, Ukraine would also have to do what you did and say, you know, we want these people back, and you would like to have them here to develop our own cities and our own country. And I think that's what should be really the goal, and where you need both. You know, you have to create a long-term resilience to make your city able to survive, you know, with a long-term vision. And one thing is clear, you know, when we do investments in cities, well, often people don't think we do investments today, but I mean, if you go to the center of Kiev, I mean, the buildings are between sometimes, you know, 30 years old, 50 years old, you know, some of the historic buildings, 20 years old. If we look, you know, that by 2050 we have strong climate goals, everything you build today will decide what happens in 30 years. You will not change it again, you know. And if you do it wrong today, you will live in a totally wrong environment in 25, 30 years down the line. You can only do things once, and then you better do them right, and you do them with a lot of foresight, and don't do it like, you know, just in an instant way of reacting to any demands or things of today. You have to think about the future to make these investments worthwhile. Otherwise, they will be lost.
Thank you, Wolfgang. I think first I want to go back to Rafał and get a better idea of the real secret of your success in Wrocław, because it had a lot going for it. You had great location, good population, well-educated, and an attractive city. And you had this macro thing that was happening. There was investment out there looking for somewhere to go. But I think, what were the most successful investments from your point of view in terms of really not just bringing in 500 jobs, but bringing in 500 jobs that generated another 1,000 jobs? Which companies were the really good ones to go for?
Then we have to speak about a certain mixture. Okay. Because at the beginning, you need to introduce standards. Therefore, you need pretty big companies coming and presenting, teaching people what does it mean standards. But then, when the level of development is already higher, you need something what is much more flexible, because the ability to move, to change the direction in a really big company isn't big enough. And this is the role startups could play in the future.
Creating a value chain in your own town.
And observing the really fast changing world, and observing really fast changing technologies, being able to react much faster. Therefore, this combination between standards and a proper behavior, I would say, and then such a kind of creativity connected with something what we call nowadays startups.
But how do you then deal with Wolfgang's issue of how do you prevent investors coming in, staying precisely the amount of time when they still get subsidies or good tax breaks, and then moving on to the next cheap location? How do you deal with that?
I mean, this is the rule of law. It should be properly created. Something is allowed, something is not allowed, and you have to stick to this. Point number two, I'm getting back to startups, because they got already, this is a space they can create a really added value. And I would say 50% of the small startups companies, they're going directly in this climate mitigation, ecological food, in this very direction.
All right, but one other question about your geography. You're just across the border from Germany, and in particular, not just that Berlin is down the road, but actually all the former East German places, which have seen a terrible population drain, which have actually been losing jobs. So have you actually been gaining at the loss of Eastern Germany, or is their loss something quite different, or you just did it better?
That was my crazy idea, demography. I mean, to make the city growing. When I started, we had been losing population, and according to the newest forecast, the situation in the year 2050 in Poland will be a very strange situation. First of all, we will be 5 million people less in the whole country, and there are only 3 sub-regions they will be growing. It's Warsaw, Kraków, and Wrocław. It means we change. I mean, it's a not good situation for not good tendency for Poland. Anyway, it is this forecast is presenting why do we need refugees in the future in that addition. But it isn't our subject today. And one more time again, we change the negative tendency in a positive one in 3 meanings. Firstly, the city in the borders is growing. We get more kids than people dying. Secondly, the agglomeration is growing, and there are people coming to the city and to the agglomeration mainly because of jobs, but in addition because of the quality of life. And now I have to switch a little bit again in the direction of sustainable development, climate mitigation, and clean water, clean air, and so on, because the newest and the most important dream of people is to combine culture with nature, and they want to have a clean nature really behind your door, and you have to create it, because otherwise you will be losing people.
Yeah, well, let's come to you, Wolfgang, on there. On the sustainable development question, because as you said, in an awful lot of Central Eastern Europe, there's an inheritance of old, dirty industry. I mean, Ukraine perhaps as much as anywhere, sort of Krivoy Rog and Donbass and so on, all that area hugely dependent on coal, on steel, and really with technologies which were very dirty. How do cities like that transform themselves without just basically losing all their jobs?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, we have to say what we mean by transformation. I mean, we talk about a process. I mean, we cannot talk about closing down just now. You know, I mean, I think this is also what Mrs. Harms in the morning said about this. I would say authoritarian tendencies sometimes in climate change. I mean, I'm a big fighter for climate change, but of course, I mean, I think we cannot destroy our societies by just, like, you know, closing down. And I think it's I would really clearly address also this idea about, you know, culture in a different way, about everyday culture. Because I mean, if you look at regions, I mean, if you look at the Ruhr area in Germany, for example, which is basically at the end of that transition process, you know, it took us many years, and now we do the same with lignite coal. You know, I mean, you know, and it's costing, of course, money and investment, but it's also a cultural aspect. You know, if a region is basically culturally signed by being a coal region, you know, you have miners, and their whole identity is being a miner. It's a lifestyle. It's a, you know, it's everything, and you have to address that dimension. and you have to take them along to culturally transform, not only give them money and, give them a job or give them sort of sometimes useless training for whatever, not knowing where they go. I think it's keeping that cultural thing and make it into something new and see and also take the people along. And this is, I think, we always look for help from outside, something that we deploy, in a region that is. But I think it's more about what Rafa says, and this is a matter of patience, a matter of creating structures, to look into the social innovation, to the capacity of the people, that you have to develop something their own that you support, but try to keep their structure, to keep their identity, and to have an idea about the process, not highly disruptive measures, but I think the problem that we sometimes face is that of course the topic is an old one and we lost time, and that's why we have now this sense of urgency, which speeds
haven't got much time.
Which speeds up, but then of course we have to increase our efforts. But without taking the people along, we will destroy the societies. I would really caution us and really take care about this cultural identity, which is the pride of people. I mean, you had it in the miners' strike and everything, there was a lot of communities that were virtually destroyed. Let me say maybe one word about this Eastern German thing. I mean, I think what we see, and that's also what Raphael just explained, I mean, from a sustainability point of view, I have no problem with a shrinking population that we have globally and that we have, of course, in our countries, because we are highly consumptive people. And the number of people reduced, is also reducing the pressure on the environment. But what we see is, of course, the concentration. And, Eastern Germany, you see places like Dresden, Leipzig, they are flourishing cities that have the same issue, of growing and being highly attractive. And there is a big debate about, should you not concentrate your efforts to these concentrated, flourishing cities, and give up part of the country. But, even if you do that, you have to have a deliberate strategy. What we see is that it just happens, and that creates a lot of frustration, of course, in the periphery. And I think we have to rethink also the relationship between cities and surrounding regions in terms of supply chains, in terms of also giving some profit, how you organize food chains and all that. I think that there, or energy. Honestly speaking, renewable energy has biomass. It has, you're using land for windmills. You have to create sort of, a value chain that also profits, of course, some of the surrounding regions.
This is a very, very interesting subject, because of course you have to support financially countryside versus urbanized space. But to get this money, you have to support urban space, because GDP is generated. But again, it's a question of a sustainable development. Yeah, you have to think about both spaces.
Question here. I'll bring you this microphone.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very interesting. And I want to share with you some reality of small cities of Ukraine. I'm from Kryvyi Rih, as you mentioned before, very polluted city. And it's very interesting about smart investment, job growth, and sustainable development. But I think that's a problem also with education. Why? I will give you an example. In Ukraine, if I'm not mistaken, we have an observation that 80% of people are supporting left ideas. And for example, mayor of Kryvyi Rih, he knew about this, and for now he give away near $500 million of hryvnias to ordinary people of Ukraine because of high tariffs. How can we talk about smart investment in cities like us when 74% of voters supported him on previous elections, and now he has near maybe 60, maybe 50% of supporting because of these giveaways of $500 million hryvnias to people. So how to educate maybe people, maybe you have some opinion, that for understanding them that it will be no smart investment without education. It will be no smart investment in this era of populism. It will be no investment in if you supporting left ideas. It will be like giveaways for 500 hryvnias for everyone, and that's all.
I didn't quite understand. What's he giving the money away for?
From budget for the because of high tariffs. You can.
Quentin, I'm going to answer the question here because the remark is an excellent one. It's even much wider because you have something what is simple. The quality of education is directly connected with better teachers, and to have better teachers, you have to pay better. And this is why, for example, in the very case of Poland, big cities, they have much better education than small cities because big cities are able to add some money to support teachers. I would say the situation in Germany is much better. The state should be responsible to keep the equal quality, to make the salaries on a good level, even in smaller societies. And this is something, for example, what the Polish state, in meaning the Polish government, doesn't understand.
I would just second, I mean, giving away money is not an investment. It's just giving away money. Investment is either in infrastructure or in, something that has a long-term impact, like education, better schools, better, This is an investment that in the long run improves the life of people. I mean, you have the money once, you spend it and it's gone. It has no impact at all because it's a vicious circle because then they will be even worse off afterwards because the money is gone. You have to talk to people. This is what I say. In principle, you have to have an idea that is carrying me longer than just an election period. But of course, that's why I'm saying it's not done overnight, and we should not be mistaken that everything in the great cities was done overnight. It's a lot of hard work, it's a lot of convincing, and it's a long process because I'm really convinced about critical mass in any respect. I was seeing, I'm just sort of taking this example of this bike rental system. I think, this bike rental system in Kiev will potentially not be very successful because you're lacking a biking infrastructure. It will only be successful if you have if you have, in 3-5 years when you build a biking infrastructure and you have a certain number of stations around the city and you have critical mass of users. Then it will suddenly turn. But you have to have this strategy that you can carry through over this period to build it. If you don't do that, one day it will be collapse and will be disappearing, and then it will be a lost investment. This is what I mean. You have to be very careful about strategic thinking, and of course this is what I say. In a culture that has been very planning oriented, it's sometimes difficult to get it back. We get now, better. I think in many of the countries in Central Eastern Europe.
This very issue is an example of the role of regulations as well. Talking about bicycles, you have to create infrastructures for bicycles, and do you allow to use this infrastructure to electrical bicycles? It's an issue of regulations. Or scooters.
Yeah, I must say, the idea of giving away money to voters sounds pretty much like populist buying of votes, rather than rather than having an investment strategy. I mean, a city like Krivori needs desperately to have clean investment, and so on, and that's where the money should be going. Who wants to ask a question over here?
I'd like to rather pick on your point a bit, and I mean, I appreciate also your presentation and your answers, but I'd like to maybe disagree, or I didn't understand you, because I think giving money and linking it necessary to left parties is not, I would disagree that this is right, because often I think in Ukraine and same in Moldova, Georgia, arguably the left parties are associated with the post-communist parties, while they're not necessarily actually left parties, and I would say that there are no proper left parties, while I think it's two different things. Investment can be done by parties from any sides, and I think that should not be mixed together, that giving money means that it's a left ideology, because I mean people or parties who claim to be on the right side also give money in Moldova, or I assume also in Ukraine. So I would just separate these two topics, and I think when making it political, we should rather, like, it can be a different approach in terms of regulation, how open is the market, but I think we should also not slide into creating more inequality. Because if we invest and we make education, for instance, always to be inaccessible for free, or that you always have to pay for theaters, and theaters have to be business friendly to survive, then I mean we're gonna end up in a very different world, I think. And I think that's just what I wanted to say, more to pick on this question, because I don't think that's necessarily left-related policies. And we should be, I would be careful about this. And the populists which are winning in the European elections, many of them are rather far right or right linked. And they go more on the narrative of, I don't know, like nationalism, which is the other side of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I would add something going in a similar direction, because we are here not about giving advices. We just presenting our experiences. Different conditions, there are general rules, but different conditions need different methods to solve the problems. Therefore, we here not spending much more time. Maybe we will be able to give advices, but just visiting and shortly observing, you're not able to say how to solve this very problem.
I'll come to you in just 1 second. What Wolfgang's point about getting selling the policy right. If you look at my country, in Britain, all the areas that voted for Brexit were overwhelmingly old industrial areas that either lost their jobs or got old industry. All the areas that voted to remain in the European Union were the successful, modern, in university cities with high research programs and so on. And that's the same in Trump's America.
Well, I mean, I think just to potentially say, I mean, I think that the point is also the difference between big politics, I mean, which is Brexit, because I mean, it's transferring basically frustration on a different level. I mean, let's face it. I mean, you know, it's transferring responsibility to an area where nobody has an idea about really in detail. You know, Europe is basically responsible for everything that's bad, and all national politics is responsible for everything that's good. I mean, it's an easy game. But I don't think that this applies to local level. And I mean, we talk about local level politics, and the mayor in such a region is a mayor, and he has to do something, or, you know, the local council has to do something about it. And then the question is about the strategies and mobilizing also the people. Because I mean, I think, you know, I know it's difficult, and I discussed it with some people, you know, to get out also of this, you know, the state is taking care situation and somebody is responsible. You know, to mobilize people to take their own responsibility, you know, but also to create a space for innovation, for social innovation, for, you know, I mean, startups, all these all these kind of things, to support this, to draw people into being responsible for their space around them and all these kind of things. I mean, it's taking time, and I'm far from, saying, initially, we were founded with the idea of, good practice. Look at this and then do it. You can of course get inspiration from somebody like Raphael. You get a lot of inspiration from a person who has done it. But ultimately, as he said, you have to do it, because we are in Ukraine, we are not in Poland, we are not in Eastern Germany, we are not in Western Germany, we are in Ukraine, and you have to find a Ukrainian way of doing it. You can get this inspiration, but ultimately you have to do it according to your own experience, your own conditions, your own cultural environment and heritage to carry it, Otherwise people will not carry it. It's different.
Thank you so much for your presentation. So I have two questions. One is regarding social entrepreneurship as one of the tools for sustainable development. So, for example, in Ukraine, it's poorly regulated or not regulated and supported at all. So my question is, in your countries, is it supported? How much, if you happen to know, how much is it developed, etc., etc.? So it's first question, and second question is like your personal opinion about sharing economy. Will it be the future, or is it like, I don't know, utopia of some kind? Thank you.
Okay, I mean, I think in the first place, I mean, I was talking about energy. And I mean, if you look at experiences, what are success factors? I mean, you're coming also from very large energy, production structures, very high centralized, grid ownership, grid access. And I mean, I think basic conditions to make this successful is, first of all, having access to the grid, so having the ability, the energy that is produced to feed it in the grid. That's a key condition, and we have even in Western Europe quite difficult situations. I mean, if you look, Spain has much more solar potential ever than Germany, but it's producing less because they still have a kind of monopolistic grid control, and sort of, you cannot just feed in what you produce, and that limits, of course, the potential, because if you can only produce for your own use, you cannot use the potential that is there. And so these are legal frameworks. These are opportunities that need to be created by legislation, and you have to take the risk to basically destroy the old structures. I mean, in Germany, where we have this feed-in tariff, we have priority feed-in for renewable energy, but of course, ultimately, we had to slow down the development to protect our big energy producers, because we wanted them to carry a bit of the legacy, at least, of nuclear energy. And they would not be able to make any contribution to the dismantling of the nuclear energy stations if we would ruin them beforehand by, let the development only go by cooperatives and citizen-owned production. But you have to start with that, with that transition. About sharing economy, I mean, the question is, what is sharing economy? I mean, is Uber sharing economy? Is Airbnb sharing economy? I think these are perverted things that have developed from the thought of sharing economy. In the meantime, they are highly commercial. They are basically destroying proper regulated business, like taxi businesses, where you have certain social standards. They're basically endangered. So this is not what we mean by sharing economy. So sharing economy is to a certain extent, I think, good and has a future, but not for all aspects. And I mean, of course, we are partly artificially recreating things that we have lost. I mean, if we look at, we have these tool sharing platforms, and I always say, 30 years ago, you would have known your neighbor, and if you live in a housing area like this, you would have known who has a good drilling machine or who has this and that, and you've just knocked the door and asked the people. Today, of course, you need a sharing platform because you don't know the people anymore. So it's just transposing something that we had in a different media, you know, to transport it, which is fine. I mean, I think it has a value, but and I, you know, for example, for cars, I think it has a large potential to reduce the number of cars and to get out of car ownership. I mean, I think we're still not at the critical mass to make it extremely convenient. I mean, in some cities we are getting there to have enough critical mass so that it's convenient, so that you know the availability is there in a feasible distance, and also the variety of cars that you can use for different purposes is there. Because I mean, you know, it's nice to have a sharing system with smarts, but for some purposes with a family you need something different than a smart. So you know, you need a variety of vehicles that are available for use in the system, and then you need critical mass of people using it in order to create the variety and accessibility to that. So also there we are in a transition period, but there is a large potential, for example, to change the urban transport in a different way and in a combination. And the other one is, of course, you need seamless access, you know, between different modes, between public transport, bikes, cars, you know, this has to work. And there we see that currently, of course, a variety of private companies are pushing into markets which are not necessarily connected. I mean, in some of the cities you have, 5 companies operating electric scooter systems that are partly polluting even like the city, because people are parking them quite wildly everywhere. So, you know, also there, of course, a good idea needs regulation, frameworks, understanding, and needs integration by somebody who has a strategy. If you just let the market do it, you will most likely not succeed or have negative impacts on your city which are not sustainable, because also these scooters, they have a lifetime of 3 months. What are we doing with all the batteries? Where are they going? You know, what is the production line? What is the cost? What is the impact? I'm not necessarily sure that this is a sustainable way of transport. Yeah.
Firstly, sharing economy is a slightly, I would say, utopian way of thinking. But you have to dream. You have to have dreams. And then you have to put your dreams to the reality. It means it's okay to have ideas, but then you have to connect it with real world. Secondly, regarding the regulation and the situation in Poland, it isn't the best one. It should go faster. Fortunately, we are the member of the European Union, and there is family pushing us in a proper direction. We have been discussing what happened yesterday. Yeah, that there was a European discussion about reducing the CO2 emission about 90%. And there was a Polish veto, unfortunately, and that stopped the procedure.
Just want to put one thought to you, a sort of devil's advocate thought. I think it was Peter Bishop who gave us the figure this morning for the degree of urbanization that we face in the coming decades. It strikes me that the big cities are now too big. Their carbon footprint is dreadful. They're sucking in cars. They're overusing energy. That we actually should have a vision of planning where actually development goes to smaller cities, to cities under 1 million in population. And these mega cities, which act like a great magnet and attract in all the development, are actually, in a carbon neutral future, simply not going to be sustainable.
Extremely difficult subject, because the reality goes in a opposite direction. Have a look. Berlin, where Barbara and I am living now. Before the Second World War, Berlin used to have 3 million people and was the third biggest city worldwide. Now it has 5 million population. It would be in the position 70 or maybe even 80. The tendency, it isn't the best tendency in this evaluation development, but it's going in this direction. Therefore, I would say we have to extremely strong think about climate mitigation in the cities. I mean, and we have to develop the way of thinking to support countryside or smaller cities. But to stop that tendency we are talking about, I'm not very optimistic.
It's on. Well, I mean, I'm a bit torn, I must say, in all that. I mean, first of all, I think it's.
He lives in Freiburg, which
Yeah.
is lovely, nice.
But honestly speaking, it's one of the fastest growing cities in Germany, and we have just had a public vote on a new Greenland development for 15,000 people. It's one of the biggest development areas in Germany, sort of as a piece. So I mean, and this is exactly what I'm basically alluding to, because the point is, in a city that is like medium-sized, you will not build like 20 floors. You will we will go to 6, I think, in this area compared to 5 in the area that I live, which is the latest large development that we had. So I mean, the point is for me is of course the concentration. You were saying you were alluding to the consumption. I mean, I do not necessarily believe that if you live in the countryside you're consuming less. Because I mean, what are you doing? I mean, you have to commute, you have to do this. If the city is well organized, I mean, it should be actually to a certain extent highly efficient, because I mean, you have short ways between living and working and access to services. And I think this is also what these places, you have culture, you have health, you have education, you have, again, critical mass, to sustain good services. I mean, you will not have access to good education in a 30,000 inhabitant town usually. I mean, that's about the critical size where you have potentially a high school, but you will not have a university. Then you will again start to, and this is, I think, what creates the difference. And I think, and also, of course, the land use issue. Density matters in terms of reducing the use of land and sort of, in getting in conflict with biodiversity and so on. The question is, of course, to find the balance to keep it attractive, between having recreational space, having access to parks and these kind of things, which are important for health issues. I mean, mental health, but this is of course, the question for me is, where do you take the space from? I mean, we have, large parking lots, we have all these things that are again driven by the individual car-based mobility, and I think if you reduce, for example, parking space and replace it by green space, you will gain a lot, and you make things walkable and attractive, and people. I mean, it's this shift. I mean, but when it's finally done, I mean, if you look at the super blocks in Barcelona, if you look at other cities that have closed down parts of their roads, I mean, it's always a matter of conflict before it happens. Or when you see, when London was introducing road charging, and Edinburgh tried to do it without any test, they failed. Stockholm did. They said, "Oh, we're going to test," and then we have a vote, and then I think you get different results. Or when Bloomberg closed Times Square, I mean, he said, "Okay, well, we are testing it and see how it works," and people started to love it. And now nobody would say, "Okay, we open it up for cars again," And I think this is giving people a look and feel how it would be like. Or if you say, "Okay, we narrow down your road and we create sort of more boulevards and greening in your street." And you put in Brussels, they did it. I don't know whether Boulevard Ansbach in Brussels. They just closed it down. They put sort of random blocks of flowers or something in. It didn't look particularly nice. No, but but that's the way it started. Now they have totally redeveloped it. They have put in, you know, nice plastering areas with trees and lawn and everything, and it's brilliant. And they would not change that again. And this is what I think is important, you know, to say, okay, if we create this density, then we have to have an overall, again, strategy, how we change the space between the buildings and to make it attractive. But that would maybe mean you take space away from the cars rather than from the people.
But watching from the global perspective, have a look. Middle Europe, including Germany, is mainly space of middle-sized cities with few exceptions. But taking Asia into consideration is a totally different story. We have to finish.
I think we do. I think we need to wind up. Are there any more questions from the floor from the students? No? If there are? I think we've done very well. I think our speakers have done wonderfully. Thank you, Rafa. Thank you, Wolfgang. That's really good. Do we need to, yes, a round of applause for our panel, please.